And welcome into the locker room. We got all kinds of things to discuss today, so hang out with us for the next 30 minutes. We're going to jump right into it now. It's tournament time in college basketball. We always look forward to this SEC tournament. We've been talking about Alabama the past couple weeks. They were going to have to get those big wins in order to get into the tournament. Tough loss to Georgia this past weekend. What kind of SEC tournament are they going to have to get to the big tournament?
I think if they win one game, they are at least one of the first four in. I think if they win two games, they're really solidly in. But with Alabama, we've seen kind of over the course of the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks that they haven't found their footing. They're great one night and they look really strong one night, and then they don't look as great the next night. But that's all a part of growing. That's all a part of getting better. And one of the guys they had to lean on is the guy you're seeing right here, is Retno Basahan. He's a senior. He was on the all-defensive team, an all-SEC first team, and he was a Scholar Athlete of the Year for the SEC. Those kind of players, seniors, veterans, leaders, those are the guys that stay calm in those big games. So with him handling the basketball for most of the part, if he can get them solid where they need to be, and then use guys like Raleigh Norris and Shannon Hale and some of the guys on the outside, I think they have what it takes to win a couple of games. But as far as just what they need technically, I think they do need a couple of wins to solidify themselves in the big dance.
Now for the Auburn Tigers, it's finishing their season strong. What are they going to have to do in this tournament to kind of go out on a better note?
Take a calendar and flip to last year. Bruce Pearl needs to cut last year's film on, because the way they ended last season was really strong. Ended the regular season okay, but they went into the tournament confident, healthy, and feeling good about themselves. This year, right now, they're confident, they're finally healthy, and as well as healthy as they could be without some of the guys that they lost for the year, like Dunnins. But I just feel like Auburn is in a good place right now to bridge to next year. You think about football, and you have a team that finishes the year 7-6. They go to a bowl that's not very well hyped, but they won their last 4 games of the season.
Right.
And then they win the bowl game. And that bowl game springs them forward into next year. Auburn can use the end of this season, what they've done so far at the end of the season, and then a nice run in the SEC tournament to really start bridging for next year, because they will not get a big dance bid. They probably won't get an NIT bid. So this is the time for Auburn to really step up and show what they can be for 2016-17.
Now pretty soon we'll find out who's going to be in the big dance. Who are some teams you're looking at that you think will maybe kind of upset some teams this year in the tournament?
It's always funny, because during championship week is when we start to see a lot of these Cinderella stories and finding out who's in and who's where. Some of these teams that are on the bubble, to me, I really find impressive. But to me, at the end of the day, it still comes back down to the big dogs.
Yeah.
And I just think that if North Carolina can do what they can do each week or each game, they have a great chance to beat a Kansas in the regional final, to beat a Michigan State. And at this point of the juncture, I really don't want to pick an upset until the bracket comes out, and we'll have a show when the bracket comes out. But I just feel like there's going to be a wild chance to have a lot of upsets, but I really see North Carolina being one of those teams that can make it really, really late into the year.
And let's move over to some high school basketball now. 2 of our local teams bringing home the blue map last week. First off, the Sacred Heart Cardinals, Coach Raphael Graves, bringing home that state championship last week.
They beat Georgiana in the state championship game, a team that went 30-1 last year. Really impressive. They got everything they wanted out of the game before, where they played Keith in the Class 1A semifinal game. And Keith gave them all they could handle. And to me, Keith is when they won the championship. They were down by 5 with 3 minutes to play in that game.
Right.
And they understood, hey, their backs are on the line. And their team hasn't had their backs on the line in many games really at all. Through the course of this year and really over the course of the last 2 years. But they were able to put it together and then play a very, very good Georgiana team in that championship and come away with the win. I'm really, really impressed by this team. They won 2 state championships in a row, knowing all season long they would be the hunted, not the hunter anymore, and they still came to play. And they deserve their championship, and they deserve everything that's coming to them, and we'll see if they can do it again for that three-peat, like we see with the Chicago Bulls and the LA Lakers and some of those teams that have sustained success. We've seen Alabama knocked on the door of a three-peat a little while ago as far as football goes. But this is a good time here for Sacred Heart, and congratulations to them.
The Spring Garden Lady Panthers also winning the state championship. You know, last year they came very close to winning it. They lost. This year, They wanted to win it. They came in and did.
And this one was probably sweeter, so to speak, of the two because Spring Garden was in the championship game last year. They played Keith. Then this year, they end up playing Keith in the semifinal game and beating Keith. So to me, the semifinal for both Sacred Heart and Spring Garden, the semifinal game was the championship. Now they had to go and take care of business, in the championship game, and they finally did, and they beat Linden. But with Spring Garden, what you're seeing is the kind of dominance that we see over the course of time. They won their first championship in 1984. They had won their last one before this year in 2008. They have sustained success. They are constants in the regional championship. They are constantly in Birmingham. And you just have to applaud what Coach Ricky Austin's done with this girls basketball team and this girls basketball program overall. Keeping them hungry, keeping them confident, and keeping them expecting to win and expecting to be there. And I feel like this year they finally did it and they culminated all of it. And I feel really good for those seniors, Takia Rogers as well as Madison Sides. They really earned it after getting their hearts broken last year.
Well, congratulations to both Sacred Heart and Spring Garden on their state championship. Stay with us here on The Locker Room. We have a great segment coming up. We're going to have some discussion. Mickey's going to join us, so stay with us here in The Locker Room. Back here in The Locker Room, we got some great discussion here. If you haven't seen in the news this week involving high school sports, Representative Richie Horton has proposed a bill that will separate private schools from playing public schools in state championship events here in the AHSAA. Now, there's been a lot of talk the past few years about this matter, about recruiting, about public schools and private schools. Just to start off, I want to get y'all's opinion on this bill. Mickey?
Well, obviously the reason that this bill is being talked about and the reason that we're even taking a whole segment to talk about this subject is because of the track record of success that we've seen with private schools in athletics. And obviously won't speak to other states because there's plenty of success to talk about right here in the state of Alabama, including right here in our East Alabama area with the success that the Sacred Heart boys basketball team has had winning the state championship the last 2 years. But also McGill-Tulane, a private school, won the football and basketball championships this season. So, obviously it is something that is frustrating a lot of coaches in the public school system. It frustrates the private school coaches as well because they see nothing wrong here. And there is definitely a growing tension, and that's why you're seeing this bill come up.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me the way this is laid out over the last few years because it's not just a one-sport thing. We saw it for a long time, whether it was in wrestling or baseball, some of these isolated peripheral sports. Baseball is the main sport, obviously, but tennis is a good example of the way where this goes on. Golf is a good example of where this goes on. Soccer is a great example of where this goes on. But now we're starting to see that permeate into the mainstream sports. We're starting to see those success on that level permeate into whether it's Madison Academy winning multiple state championships. Sacred Heart now is a budding power. You can make an argument. This was the best 1A school to win a boys basketball state championship in the history of Class 1A basketball. And we're starting to see it permeate into some of these bigger sports, more popular sports, more visible sports. And now you're starting to see the rub with the public schools, the public school administrations, the public school coaches. But just like Mickey said, you're starting to see the frustration the other way around because a lot of the private schools are now saying, why now?
Yeah.
You didn't have a problem with it before, but why are you having a problem with it now? And so I think there's legitimate arguments here on both sides of this thing. It'll be interesting to see where this bill does go because now it's in the hands of the legislature. This is not the AHSAA. Yeah. They've had a chance to take care of this for many, many years now. They haven't. And so now it's in the hands of lawmakers. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and that's a great point. They're going to have to deal with it because I don't think this is going away. And but let's just be honest. The crux of this tension is the perceived recruiting that public schools think goes on with the private schools. And I talked to a coach today who has coached in private school, very successful, coached in the public schools. And he thinks that, and I wanted to talk to someone who had been on both sides of the fence. He told me that he felt like the rules were sufficient to handle this, But he felt like a lot of schools let a lot of things go unreported because if they see something that happens with a school that maybe isn't that good, they let it go. But he thinks the issue is more schools need to do more reporting about violations that they see, because let's also be honest, recruiting does happen, but it happens in both sides of the fence. It happens in the public school system, and it happens in the private school situation.
Right, and that's a good point. And the thing is that in order to report it, you have to have a lot of certified evidence. There's a lot of energy that needs to be spilled in order to report it, and in order to get it, whether it's in the legitimate, whether it's, let's just take a bona fide move. That's one example of trying to catch somebody, for lack of a better term, recruiting. It's just, to me, the burden of proof is so much harder on the schools and the teams and the players and the people and the community trying to do it. And so I think that you can make an argument really on both sides of this. You can make an argument that the private schools do have a legitimate beef with the way things are being handled, and you do have a legitimate beef the other way around. I just think it's up to the AHSAA to start making things a little bit more clear about what is now acceptable and what is not acceptable. And if something is going to be acceptable, let it be acceptable across the board. If not, let it be acceptable across the board. But you have things like a multiplier, which already tangles, that balances the scales a little bit. And you have different avenues and different mechanisms that the HSA tries to do. I just think that they have to do it a little bit harder, a little bit better, because this is not something that's just coming from the schools and just coming from the coaches. This is coming from communities. And now we're starting to see it in public avenues. We're starting to see it in newspapers and in TV clips. And we're starting to see it now on a grander scale. And so I think that with lawmakers, and you can put politicians where you need to put them, but with lawmakers and with the AHSAA, if they can get together and make a way to clear this up a little bit, I think that we'll be on a better avenue going forward, because until then, I think we're going to have a lot of animosity.
Well, we have spoken with several coaches and administrators today about this subject, and one of those is Coach Raphael Graves from Sacred Heart, and here is what he had to say today about this proposal.
After reading a lot of the stuff on it, I was just looking at it I was just trying to figure out where are all the advantages that come for private schools over public schools, and I was looking at over the past 20 years in basketball. This is boys basketball. There were 128 state championships given out, and public schools won 104 of them. Private schools won 24 of those 128. So, just as well as when public schools win, and they have to get the same credit for their hard work and all those things, do the same thing for private. Because at the end of the day, they're all schools. I think there's bigger issues here than athletics.
And guys, if we see this bill pass, will that mean we're going to see Faith Christian play McGill-Tulane in the state championship? How is the AHSAA going to clarify, how they're going to reclassify, what they're going to do with these private schools playing each other? Some are 7A, some are 1A. How will that go about?
One of the things that is really hard about this is the logistics of it. And I think that's part of the reason why this thing really hasn't taken off as much as some of the people wanted to take off, being able to separate them. Because if I'm not mistaken, between Class 1A and Class 4A, there's about 40 to 50 private schools. That's not a lot when you consider the entire state of Alabama, Mobile down to up to Huntsville. I just think that we've got to get to a point where the playing field is balanced. And just like Ralph said, I think that it's a bigger issue than athletics, and I think we need to hash those things out, because until a championship format is set where both public and private are playing on quote-unquote equal ground, we're going to keep having this. And this will be a cyclical issue. And I know this is going to be an issue we'll talk about for a while.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that the author of this bill even expects this to even get a vote. You may have a politician here trying to put some political pressure on Montgomery to, as Gerhard was talking about, to maybe sit down and deal with this in a more open and an aggressive way, because the only group that can really solve this is the High School Athletic Association. And I'm not sure what that answer is. I think a lot of the decisions that go on in the private school setting that you see show up in athletics, you never see the benefits that happen in the classroom, because a lot of these parents are choosing a private school because of the educational aspect. And private schools play a major role in our communities across the state. But on the other hand, you can see the public schools' frustration in that, athletics is so cyclical, and, rarely do you see someone be good every single year, because all of that is cyclical. And then you have a team like Sacs a few years ago that probably should have won the 4A state championship, but they couldn't get past Madison Academy, who a lot of people say recruit in Huntsville. So, that's, again, there's that tension. And I don't know what the solution is, but and maybe, as Gerhard said, maybe if the High School Athletic Association more aggressively dealt with this, maybe that would calm it down a little bit. I don't think they can come up with some kind of magic formula to fix it and make everybody happy. But obviously, when you got politicians writing bills trying to get it dealt with in the political realm, that's not the answer.
Exactly. And I think that just like we see in Washington, with whether it's the Joint Chiefs or whatever, I think even inviting some of these coaches, the coaches that have been vocal about it on the public side and on the private side, inviting them all one summer in June when there's nothing else going on, make it a dead 2 or 3 days, and then just get some of the top coaches, former coaches, and the people who are currently plugged in, the administration that's plugged in right now. And I think with that, you'll at least start taking some movement forward on this, because then they can get out and stop using coded language and start just being real about what's going on, and then help at some point try to find a way to answer all these solutions.
Well, interesting stuff there, and of course we'll keep talking about this if it stays going, but enjoy the conversation, guys. We'll be back with more. It's the Locker Room Roundtable. More discussion coming up here in the locker room. Back here in the locker room, it's time for the Locker Room Roundtable. Right after the Super Bowl, we discussed this a lot, but it came official this week, Peyton Manning retiring.
Yeah, it's, a fairy tale story. You look at his boss, John Elway, who did essentially the same thing, rode a great defense, and with John Elway's case, he rode a great running back in Terrell Davis, and used that to win a championship and do something no one else has done, to win a Super Bowl with 2 different things as a starting quarterback. Lots of things fell right for Denver. Brock Osweiler came in there, won a few games, gave them home field advantage against the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. Perfect time to retire, I think. And I don't know if y'all saw the entire press conference. That was some of the most eloquent speaking I've heard from anybody. Not athletes, not anybody. And that was a fantastic speech. I just think that this is so perfect. 18 years, he's number 18. With all the surgeries that he's had, he's not the same kind of quarterback that he was, even 3 or 4 years ago when he was setting records. I think this was a perfect time, and I couldn't see it being any better for a guy of his caliber, and obviously a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Well, for those of us who enjoy watching pro football, which I do, it's really sad to see him go. Whether you like him or not, he made it interesting, and obviously the way he approached the quarterback position, he's done it like nobody else has ever done it in football history. So sad to see him go, because we'll miss turning on the TV and seeing those Brady-Manning matchups. But I tell you, the bigger thing for the Broncos, they kind of knew Manning was going to step down. There was no other decision there. But Brock Osweiler deciding to go with the Houston Texans on a free agent contract, I don't think the Broncos were totally expecting that. But that obviously leaves a big hole for Denver at quarterback. But hey, I think even RG3 could come in with that defense and win another Super Bowl.
Exactly.
A couple other NFL quarterbacks retiring: Calvin Johnson, Matt Hasselbeck.
Yeah, Hasselbeck, he's one of those guys that's 40 years old, has played for forever. He has got a great career in broadcasting ahead of him, and he'll fit right in with his brother and with his sister-in-law. To me, Matt Hasselbeck, he is what every quarterback wants to be. That's not Peyton Manning. You want to play for a long time in the NFL, still be of value. At age 40, he won 3 or 4 games when Andrew Luck went down. He was still of value even late, and then he was a good mentor for some of the younger guys that are coming in. So obviously a fantastic career. And then with Calvin Johnson, you just cannot help to see all, and I hate to put it in this negative light, you can't help to see all of the Barry Sanders equivalencies. A guy who is on the back end of his prime, but still a whole lot of good football left, a lot of good snaps left on Sundays. And he says, this organization, I can't take it anymore, because that's the only way that I see it. I don't see, if he played last year with the Denver Broncos or the New England Patriots or the Texans or even the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that's iffy. I think he's still in the NFL, and it's sad to see a guy like him go and under the conditions that he played most of his career with.
Maybe he's okay with it, because obviously I think it's bothered me more than it has Barry Sanders that he's not the NFL's all-time leading rusher. And maybe Calvin Johnson's okay with this, because I don't think he's a lot for the Hall of Fame at this point in his career.
No, he's not.
But yeah, Detroit fans have got to be going, why us?
Some college football talk now. There's a lot of discussion last spring about satellite camps. Michigan's coming back to Florida for another satellite camp in spring break. Now, Florida coach Jim McElwain came out today. He said that's perfectly fine for them to come down here. But that's not the same feeling for all the SEC coaches. Why is it okay for some and not for others?
This to me is the powers that be in college football just have to sit down and work this out. If this is going to be something that is going to be allowed, then everybody's going to have to step up their game, and you're going to have teams crisscrossing the country based on what their recruiting map is like, and they're going to be holding camps and doing this. And I guess you can't fault Harbaugh for doing this. It's creative. He's new to the job. He's very motivated. Some of those coaches that are a little more settled in and not as motivated and don't want to work as hard now are going to be forced to work a little harder if they allow this to go on. But this is just an issue that the NCAA is going to have to work out.
Yeah, and credit Jim Harbaugh for what he's doing here. He understands that he will not get the talent to come way north without coming way south to get that talent. Right. And there's just not a lot of it up there, and there's a lot of that has to do with the economy and people just moving to warmer cities and warmer climates. I just think that this is genius of him to know to put a satellite camp in Florida, to bring his team down during spring ball, to hold a satellite camp in Alabama, which he's doing for the second consecutive year. Hopefully he leaves a shirt on this time. I think that he's changing the game, he's changing the dynamic. And with the SEC especially, and a lot of the reason why the SEC doesn't like it is because you can't hold satellite camps outside, I think 50 miles away from your campus site. So SEC coaches, they want an equal playing ground, but at the same time, they're irked to see one of the guys at a power school, at one of the best football institutions, starting to make a move into SEC territory. I think what you're seeing with Jim McElwain, that's just posturing. He just doesn't want to sound like he's mad about it. I think on the inside, he is really upset about it.
All right, well, good stuff there. That'll do it for this week's edition of The Locker Room. If you missed the show and you want to check it out again, here are some times you can do so. Thursdays, you can check it out 3 different times, and a couple times on Friday as well. And, of course, on TV24.tv on the on-demand section. Also, check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be back next week here in The Locker Room.